Hi everybody, got a package in the mail today. This one all the way from Greece. This is from Crippled God Foundry, who is currently running a Kickstarter campaign for an undead themed fantasy line of miniatures called The Curse of Hollow Hills. Let's open it up and take a look. Hi everyone, my name is Nate and you're watching WASD20, a channel about tabletop RPGs and fantasy maps. Before we slice open the box here, I do want to mention that this is a paid promotional video. I want to thank Crippled God Foundry for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel. If you like what you see here, make sure you go support them by visiting their Kickstarter and pledging. There are only 3 days left at time of publication. With that out of the way, let's crack this thing open. All right, so as we slice into the box here, just a little word about Crippled God Foundry. They are a Greek company, as I mentioned before, and they're a pretty small team of people who do everything in-house. They do the digital sculpting, the 3D prototypes, and the final hand casting in resin. These miniatures are made using high-quality resin, and they use vacuum and pressure casting to deliver a really high-quality product. They're made in small batches, hand-poured, all that good stuff, so you know you're getting a good thing here. Also, packing peanuts. Ooh, the miniatures, yes. Oh, these look nice. All right, so this little note here, Crippled God Foundry, miniatures, terrain, and accessories. Oh, cool, they have some nice looking terrain there. All right, let's take a look at some of these miniatures here. Now, these miniatures are some assembly required, and they are not based. But I do have a bunch of bases that I will be able to use, so that won't be an issue. Little skeleton, really nice looking. Got a little bit of a plasticky string there, no big deal. And right here, so you can see these are like the sprues where they were broken off. So as we move on here, these are all prototype miniatures for their current Kickstarter, The Curse of Hollow Hills. I'll show you a few more of the miniatures that I didn't get in a few minutes here. I'll show you their actual Kickstarter page. You can see the wide variety. But these are really nice. I'm really liking what I'm seeing here. There's just a really solid level of detail that's just really crisp looking. It's not muddy or it's not too fiddly. It's just really crisp, good amount of detail. And I really like the way they look. Now for this video, I wasn't originally intending to fully assemble and base them all, but once I saw them, I just thought this really does need to be shown off properly. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to the fully assembled miniatures and we'll talk about the quality of them and all that. But afterwards, I will go back and I'll give you some tips on how to actually deal with these assembly and basing, what type of glue to use and all that stuff, because for me it was definitely a learning experience. All right, so here we go. So we are going to be looking at each individual miniature and just talking about the sculpt. This one right here is a zombie to start us off. And my only criticism of this one is it was actually a little bit hard to tell that it was a zombie. I guess the stance, the posture definitely helps sell it. And it's got kind of a big hole in his head. But other than that, it seems like it could have been a little more chewed up and tattered. This female zombie is a bit more clear, and honestly, this one just freaks me out. This is nightmare fodder right here, guys. I don't know. But yeah, I like it. It's good. It's effective. This next one here I absolutely love. It's some kind of horrifying undead winged creature, and yeah, its pose is really cool. It's kind of balanced on its tail very precariously, but because of the rigidity of the resin, it actually works quite well and seems very sturdy. You might also notice there's some of those stringy things, plastic bits in the wings. Those do come off really easily. I just didn't put much effort into it. You just take an X-Acto knife to them and they practically flake right off. This one looks like a necromancer, and one of the remarkable things is I can actually read the text on his scrolls. Now, it's not in English, so I don't know what it says, but you can actually make out the letters. It's amazing. Extreme detail. The other thing is there's a bit of a mold line on the bottom right side of his cape, and this is really the heaviest mold line I could find on any of the miniatures, and it's very minor. So I'm really impressed that there's not more mold lines here. I'm not sure exactly what the process is for casting them, but it's pretty remarkable. Now this one is absolutely one of my favorites. This is a vampire, obviously, and it's so much like Nosferatu from the 1979 Werner Herzog version that I absolutely adore it. I love that movie, and yeah, they just went for it. It's sinister, it's evil, there's a lot of great detail, and he's wiping his mouth. Now here we've got some kind of ghoulish monstrosity, and you might notice there's a pretty significant seam line there on the right shoulder. That's because I didn't probably glue the right arm in the correct position, but even when you do glue stuff in the right position, you're probably going to have some seam lines to fill on these miniatures if you want to get a really nice look. And here we have a skeletal warrior. I absolutely love this one. It's got a super dynamic pose, really nice looking, good amount of detail, and he just looks so classic and gothic, like something out of Dark Souls. And now our heroes. Here we have the vampire hunter, just a good old-fashioned vampire hunter, torch and crossbow and sword on his back, and yeah, definitely fits the bill, and it's a good looking sculpt. Here we have some kind of human fighter or cleric maybe. He's got a mace and a shield, and yeah, I really like this one. Again, a really dynamic pose that I really appreciate. Also, the detail on the shield is excellent. And here we have an elven bard. This one's not necessarily my favorite. It's fine, totally sufficient. For some reason it reminds me of the style of a Hero Forge miniature. But she is a bard, she has an instrument on her back, and it looks like she might be singing. And the last of the heroes, we have this human, I think, fighter or paladin, maybe cleric. Really good looking. I love this sculpt. Look at that detail on the hair. It's really incredible. And when she comes around, you'll see the shield as well. Just a really cool looking design on the shield and excellent detail. And lastly, we have our undead dragon. Oh man, this one is epic. When I saw it in the box, I was so excited. It's got, just bits of flesh hanging off of it. The wings are tattered. The skin itself looks like chicken flesh. It looks absolutely disgusting. And yeah, it was a bit of a trick to put together, but definitely worth it in the end. And I can't wait to paint this thing one of these days. So as promised, here is a look at the wider selection of miniatures, 36 in total. Lots of cool undead creatures that I didn't even get to show you today. So yeah, so much cool stuff. In fact, there's even more now because of stretch goals that have been unlocked. So personally, I'm really excited to get these once they start delivering to backers, which is estimated to be January of 2020. Now, I did want to speak a little bit about the process of assembling these miniatures, gluing them together and then gluing them to bases. It was a bit tricky. It was definitely a learning experience for me. I have not had a whole lot of experience with miniatures like this. First, I should mention that there were definitely pieces that I was assembling that I would not have if I were actually going to paint these. Because in assembling certain limbs and other things like the wings of the dragon, I have actually made it much harder to paint. So when I actually do paint some of these things, I actually have to disassemble them. Still, for the actual assembly, one of the reasons it was tricky for me at first is because I was using the wrong glue. I've used this stuff quite a bit when I'm gluing miniatures to bases, and it's worked just fine in the past, but for these miniatures, it was not sufficient to hold limbs together and things like that. So as always, I went to Ryder's Hobby Shop where they have some very knowledgeable people who helped me, and bought this glue right here for only $4. So this is just some very thin super glue essentially. You don't want to get the gel kind of super glue, and when in doubt, go to your local hobby shop and ask them what you should use for resin miniatures. I did find that this stuff worked like a charm. Still have to hold it in place very still for about 5 to 10 seconds, but after that 5 to 10 seconds, you can generally let go and it's good to go. So once I got the hang of the process, it really wasn't that bad, except for a couple limbs that were just so tiny that were really hard to even pinch and get in place. Just on a couple of those miniatures, it proved to be pretty tricky, but I eventually did get them done. To wrap things up here, I am really impressed with these miniatures. I have to admit, I don't have that much experience with independent miniature companies. I've only bought miniatures really from Reaper and WizKids, which are the big ones. Their miniatures are fine, but these are definitely a step above in terms of the quality of the sculpt, the hardness of the material, and you get that warm fuzzy feeling because you're supporting a small company of passionate gamers. Now you are going to pay a bit more than you would for Reaper Bones or WizKids for this high quality of a miniature. So for some of you, I understand if that's not worth it. Still, having these in my hands and seeing with my own eyes how high the quality is, honestly, I'm going to have trouble going back to some of those lower quality miniatures. All right, that's all for this one, everybody. I want to thank you all so much for joining me. Thanks again to Crippled God Foundry for sponsoring this video, and a huge thank you to my patrons who also help support this channel on a monthly basis. These people are a big reason I'm able to do what I do here on the channel, so thanks, patrons. You too can join with them and get some pretty cool rewards. Check it out at patreon.com/WASD20. All right, thanks again, guys. Take care. You'll see me again very soon.